The debt Sarah stood at the entrance of Mr. Barrow's office, feeling a wave of fear wash over her. Her heart raced in her chest as she looked down at the ground. She had always been a responsible person, but now she had failed. She owed a large amount of money, and she had no way to pay it back. The debt had started as a small loan for her sick mother, but things had gone horribly wrong. The bills kept piling up and the interest rates skyrocketed, making it impossible for her to catch up. Mr. Barrow, the man she had borrowed the money from, was ruthless. He didn't care about her reasons or her struggles. All he cared about was getting his money back. She had tried to explain her situation, but it didn't matter. Mr. Barrow had made it clear he wanted his money and he wanted it now. He had given her every chance to pay back what she owed, but she had failed, and now she had to face the consequences. She had heard rumors about Mr. Barrow's punishments, but nothing could have prepared her for what he had in mind. When she walked into the room, she saw the cold, indifferent faces of 10 men sitting in chairs, waiting. Her stomach turned with anxiety. These men were here to claim what Mr. Barrow had promised: a night with Sarah, a punishment for her inability to pay her debts. The room was dark, and the men's eyes seemed to bore into her as she stood there. Frozen in fear, Mr. Barrow's voice cut through the silence. He smiled cruelly as he spoke. "Tonight you will repay your debts. These men will rent you for the night. Each one will pay a price, and you will serve them." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mind screamed for a way out, but she knew there was none. She was trapped, caught in the grip of her own mistakes. Her heart sank as she realized how far she had fallen, how low she had become in the eyes of others. The debt she had taken on to save her mother had now cost her everything. But just when she thought she couldn't take any more, a voice broke the silence. It was deep and calm. "I'll take her first," said one man from the corner of the room. His voice didn't sound cruel. In fact, there was something almost kind in it. Sarah looked up, meeting his gaze. The man's eyes were dark, but there was a softness to them that made her heart skip a beat. She had expected to see judgment or maybe pity, but instead she saw something else: understanding. But it didn't matter. She didn't have time to think about who he was or why he seemed different from the others. Mr. Barrow motioned toward him and Sarah was pulled from her thoughts. "Get to it," Mr. Barrow snapped, his tone sharp and impatient. The man stood up, walking toward Sarah. Every step he took felt heavy, like the weight of the moment was pressing down on them both. She tried to steady her breath, but it was hard. Her legs felt like jelly, and she feared she might collapse at any moment. As the man reached her, he spoke again. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. "I'm here." For a moment, Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man's voice was full of a sincerity she hadn't expected. She wanted to believe him, to find comfort in his words, but it was hard. She had learned long ago not to trust people, especially when it seemed too good to be true. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of honesty, that made her hesitate. Was it possible that someone could truly care, even in this cruel place? Was it possible that she might not have to go through this night completely alone? The man gently took her arm and led her toward the center of the room. The others watched in silence, but Sarah felt like her world had shrunk to just her and this stranger. She couldn't explain why, but there was something about him that made her feel safe for the briefest moment. She didn't know what the night would bring or how she would make it through. But as she walked with him, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe, just maybe, someone could help her find a way out. The agreement. The room felt colder than before, as if the darkness itself had tightened its grip around Sarah. She had no idea what was about to happen, but she could feel her heart pounding against her chest, each beat louder than the last. She tried to steady herself, but the fear was overwhelming. Her mind raced with thoughts of escape, but her body refused to move. The man who had spoken earlier, the one who had offered a kind word, was standing beside her. He looked down at her with something like sympathy in his eyes, but there was no way out now. He was here to take his turn. Sarah tried to pull away, but his hand was firm, not rough, just enough to keep her in place. "I'll take her first," he repeated, his voice steady and calm. Mr. Barrow, standing at the far side of the room, smirked. He had watched everything unfold with a cold, detached gaze. He was used to seeing people like Sarah brought to their knees, broken by the weight of their debts. He knew how to play his part, and tonight he intended to enjoy the show. "Get it over with," Mr. Barrow said flatly, not caring for the delay. Sarah was led toward a small, dimly lit corner of the room. She couldn't understand why the man who had spoken to her looked different from the others. His expression was serious but not cruel. He wasn't smiling like the others. He didn't treat her like an object to be used and discarded. When they reached the corner, he finally released her arm. Sarah stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. He didn't speak at first, just watched her closely. His silence was almost comforting, like he wasn't rushing her or forcing her into anything. "I'm not like the others," he said, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear him. "I won't treat you like they will." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had heard words like that before, promises made by men who didn't care. But something about his tone made her think he wasn't lying. She looked up at him, trying to make sense of his words, but before she could respond, he continued. "You don't deserve this," he said softly, but it was loud enough for Sarah to hear. His eyes were kind, but there was also a deep sadness in them. "I won't let them hurt you." Sarah's head was spinning. What was he saying? Could she trust him? Was this part of the game? She had been promised nothing but pain tonight, yet this stranger, this man who had barely spoken a word to her, seemed to be offering something different, something she didn't understand. He stepped closer, but not in a way that made her feel threatened. He stood at a distance, respectful, of her personal space, and his gaze softened. "I won't let them take what's not theirs." For the first time that night, Sarah felt a small spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. Was this really happening? Was she really about to be treated with respect even here, in the place where she had been humiliated by her debt? "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, almost too afraid to ask. He hesitated, as though unsure how much to share with her. Then, after a long moment, he spoke again, quieter this time, like he was revealing a secret. "My name is Liam." Liam. The name echoed in Sarah's mind. She had never met anyone like him before. He wasn't like the other men who had made her feel like nothing more than a piece of property to be rented. He wasn't like the cold, calculating Mr. Barrow, who only saw her as a tool to collect his money. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice shaky. Liam looked at her, his gaze intense. "Because I don't believe in punishing people for things they can't control," he said. "And I don't believe in this system. It's wrong." Sarah didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like this. The men in the room had come for their share of her, and they had treated her like an object, something to be used, and discarded once they were finished. But Liam wasn't like them. He didn't seem to want anything from her except to protect her. For a moment, Sarah felt like she could breathe again, but that feeling was short-lived. Mr. Barrow's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "Enough talking, Liam," Mr. Barrow growled. "Do what you're here for. We don't have time for this." Liam's jaw clenched at the sound of Mr. Barrow's harsh words, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Sarah's, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, standing in the corner of that cold room, and Liam's words were the only thing that mattered. "I won't let them hurt you," Liam said again, his voice full of determination. Then something shifted. Sarah didn't know what it was, but she felt it. Maybe it was the way Liam looked at her. Maybe it was the softness of his touch when he placed a hand on her shoulder, like he was offering her something more than just a night of punishment. Without another word, he gently took her hand and led her back into the center of the room. The men watched in silence, waiting for what would happen next. But Sarah knew something had changed. Maybe it was just a small spark of hope. but it was enough to make her believe that not all men were the same, that not all people could be cruel and heartless. As she walked with Liam, she realized that tonight, for the first time, she wasn't just a victim. She wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, this night wouldn't end in darkness. The first encounter. The room was tense, heavy with silence, but as Sarah walked beside Liam, she felt a strange sense of calm. The other men in the room watched them, their eyes narrowing with curiosity and impatience. But Liam didn't seem to care. His focus remained solely on Sarah, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos she had expected. Liam led Sarah to a small private corner of the room, away from the eyes of the other men. The air was thick with anticipation, but Liam's presence was steady, like an anchor. He didn't hurry or pressure her. He let her take her time. Sarah stood there, unsure of what to do next. Her body trembled from the stress. But something about Liam's quiet confidence made her feel like she wasn't entirely powerless in this situation. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he sat down on the small chair in front of a small wooden table and gestured for Sarah to sit across from him. It was simple, but there was an odd comfort in the gesture, as though they were two strangers meeting for the first time, not under these cruel circumstances, but in a different world, where everything wasn't twisted by fear. "Do you want to talk?" Liam asked, his voice gentle, breaking the silence. His eyes met hers, steady and full of something Sarah hadn't expected. Understanding. For a long moment, Sarah was silent. She didn't know what to say. The world she had known for so long had been filled with only fear and desperation. But in this small, dim corner of the room, surrounded by cold walls and strange men, Liam's calm presence felt like a breath of fresh air. He wasn't demanding anything from her. He wasn't treating her like a possession to be rented. He was treating her like a person. Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't know how I got here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted this. Any of it." Liam's eyes softened. "You don't deserve this," he said, his tone filled with sincerity. "But you're here now and we'll find a way out of it. Just give me a chance." The words hung in the air and Sarah found herself staring at Liam, her heart pounding. She didn't know what he meant by find a way out, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of escape. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore," she confessed, her voice shaky. "I've been lied to so many times. I thought this would be just another empty promise." Liam leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm not like the others," he said firmly. "I know I can't undo what's been done to you, but I can promise you this. I'll never lie to you." For a moment, Sarah didn't know how to respond. His words were almost too perfect, too kind for a situation like this. But she wanted to believe him. She had to believe him. Her whole body screamed for hope, for something better than what she had been handed. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, still not fully understanding. "Why help me?" Liam took a deep breath, his eyes distant for a moment. "Because I've seen what people can do to each other when they're desperate. I've seen good people pushed to their breaking points, and I've seen them destroyed by the world. I don't want that for you. And I don't want to be another person who stands by and watches it happen." Sarah blinked back tears. She had never met someone who seemed to care about her well-being without wanting something in return. It was almost too much to process. Could he really be different? Could he really help her escape this nightmare? "Can you really get me out of here?" she whispered, her voice fragile. Liam's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to harden with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." Before Sarah could say another word, the sound of Mr. Barrow's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Enough chit-chat," he called from across the room. "You're wasting time. She's not your charity case, Liam." Sarah felt a rush of panic flood through her. She didn't want to go back into that cold world of judgment and cruelty. But Liam stood up slowly, blocking her view of the others. "Let's get this over with," he said quietly, but the steel in his voice was unmistakable. He didn't turn to Mr. Barrow or anyone else in the room. His attention stayed firmly on Sarah. He walked toward the door, but before they reached it, he stopped. He turned back to face her, his gaze intense. "Listen to me, Sarah. Whatever happens next, don't forget this. You are not alone. I won't let you suffer alone." His words, like a promise, seemed to echo in the small corner of the room. Sarah's heart ached with the truth in them. She wasn't sure what Liam's plans were or how he would make it all work, but for the first time, she believed in the possibility of hope. The two of them stepped back into the main area, where the other men waited, their eyes filled with anticipation. But Sarah didn't feel as frightened anymore. She had Liam with her. For the first time that night, she felt like she wasn't just a victim. Liam took a deep breath, his posture straight and unwavering. "Let's do this," he said, his voice calm but with an edge that made it clear he wasn't backing down. Sarah followed him, her head held a little higher, her heart a little lighter. There was still a long night ahead, but she wasn't facing it alone. Not anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a way to survive this nightmare, to make it through to the other side. An unexpected connection. The night stretched on, each minute feeling longer than the last. But somehow, in the quiet moments between the cruel transactions, something in Sarah began to change. She was no longer just a victim being tossed between men, enduring one after another. In the midst of this nightmare, Liam had given her something she hadn't expected: hope. They stood in the same small corner of the room once more, away from the eyes of the others. The tension in the air seemed to ease when Liam was near. His calm, steady presence made the chaos around them seem more distant, like it belonged to another world. But Sarah knew it wasn't that simple. She knew the night wasn't over, and there was still much to endure. Yet for the first time, Sarah felt like she could breathe again. She wasn't being treated like an object, a tool to be used. With Liam, she was just a person. And that small detail, that simple act of dignity, was enough to make her feel something she thought was long lost: human again. Liam had just finished speaking to the other men, trying to maintain order in the chaos. He wasn't just here for his own sake, but to ensure that Sarah wasn't treated the way the others had planned. It was almost as if he were shielding her, protecting her, even though there was no one else in the room who would ever intervene. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, watching him interact with the others. Despite the cold, calculating looks from the men around them, Liam remained calm. His words were firm but not harsh. He wasn't demanding, yet he commanded respect. Sarah couldn't help but wonder who he really was. He didn't belong here in this hellish place. He was different. He cared. "Are you okay?" Liam asked suddenly, breaking her thoughts. He had been watching her, though she hadn't noticed. There was something soft in his eyes now, something more than just pity. He didn't look at her with the same detached gaze the others had, as though she were just a means to an end. He saw her, really saw her. Sarah nodded slowly, but her throat was tight and she could barely speak. She had been holding so much in all night: fear, anger, shame. It was overwhelming, and she wasn't sure if she could handle much more. But something in Liam's eyes made her feel like she could let go, just a little bit. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't part of this nightmare. "I'm fine," she said softly, trying to convince herself more than him. But Liam didn't believe her. "You don't have to pretend with me, Sarah," he said gently, his voice steady and warm. "You're not alone in this." Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever said something like that to her, not in the way he did. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that there was a way out of this. But every time she allowed herself to hope, she was reminded of how fragile that hope was. One wrong move and it could all be shattered. Liam seemed to sense her hesitation. He knelt down in front of her, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her feel like the entire world had faded away. It was just the two of them, and in that moment, Sarah realized something. She wasn't just afraid of the men in the room. She was afraid of the hope Liam had sparked in her. She was afraid that if she let herself believe in him, She might be hurt again. But Liam's voice was calm, unwavering. "You don't have to trust anyone else, but you can trust me," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you, not while I'm here." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She had never known what it felt like to be genuinely cared for, not like this. She had given so much of herself to others, tried to please everyone, but in the end, she had only been left broken and empty. But now in this moment, she didn't have to pretend anymore. She didn't have to hide her pain. "I don't want to be alone anymore," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam's hand reached out to gently rest on hers. The warmth of his touch was a small comfort, but it was enough. "You won't be," he promised. "I'm here." It was a simple promise, but the way he said it made it feel like the most important thing in the world. Sarah held on to his words, desperate to believe in them, desperate to believe that someone out there cared enough to help her escape this hellish nightmare. The moment between them stretched on, quiet and filled with an understanding that neither of them had expected. But then, as if on cue, Mr. Barrow's voice rang out again, sharp and commanding. "Enough!" he barked, his eyes flicking toward Sarah and Liam. "No more distractions. It's time." Liam's expression hardened at the sound of Mr. Barrow's voice, but he didn't break his gaze from Sarah. For a moment he just stood there, his hand still resting on hers, offering her the silent support she needed. But Sarah knew they couldn't avoid it forever. The men would come for their turn. She could see the darkness in their eyes, the hunger for something they could never truly possess. But Liam's presence, his quiet strength, made her feel like there was still something worth fighting for. With a deep breath, Liam stood up, offering her a hand. "We don't have to do this alone," he said again, his voice steady. "Not while I'm here." Sarah took his hand, her grip firm as she stood beside him. The fear was still there, deep in her chest, but it was mixed with something else now. Something stronger. She wasn't just going to survive this night. She was going to find a way out with Liam by her side. Together, they stepped back into the middle of the room, where the others waited. And though Sarah knew the night wasn't over, she wasn't afraid anymore, not like before. She had Liam with her. And that, in itself, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was a way to escape this nightmare after all. The turning point. The night dragged on, each passing hour heavy with dread. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, her body trembling from exhaustion, but her mind still restless. She could feel the eyes of the men watching her, waiting for their turn, like predators circling prey. The thought made her stomach twist, but then she turned her gaze to Liam. He was standing near the door, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room, his expression unreadable. He hadn't left her side since the beginning. Every time one of the men moved too close, Liam stepped in, blocking them with a calm but firm presence. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, yet somehow his quiet strength was enough to keep them at bay for the moment. Sarah couldn't understand it. Why was he doing this? Why was he protecting her when he had no reason to? The other men were growing restless. They muttered among themselves, their voices filled with irritation. One of them, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, finally stepped forward. "This isn't how it works," he growled. "We all paid. She belongs to us tonight." Sarah's heart leapt into her throat. She shrank back into the chair, bracing herself for what would come. But Liam didn't move aside. Instead, he squared his shoulders, his calm gaze fixed on the scarred man. "She doesn't belong to anyone," Liam said firmly. His voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. The scarred man laughed harshly. "You think you can stop all of us?" He gestured to the others, who nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with cruel hunger. "You can't stand in the way of 10 men." Liam's jaw tightened. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but you'll have to go through me first." The tension in the room thickened. Sarah's hands clutched the edge of the chair, her knuckles white. Fear burned in her chest, but alongside it was something else, something new. Hope. She had never seen anyone stand up for her before, never seen anyone put themselves between her and danger. Liam wasn't just words. He was action. Mr. Barrow, watching from the corner with a smug expression, finally spoke. Enough games, Liam. You knew the deal when you walked in here. She pays her debt with her body, and these men paid for their share. Step aside, or I'll make sure you regret it. Liam turned his head slowly, his eyes locking on Mr. Barrow. The room seemed to hold its breath as he answered. No, I won't let this happen. The words struck Sarah like lightning. No one had ever defied Mr. Barrow before, not openly. Everyone feared him. Everyone obeyed him. Yet here was Liam, standing tall and unshaken, refusing to give in. Mr. Barrow's smile faded, replaced by a scowl. You think you can challenge me? Do you know how many people I control? How much power I hold? His voice rose, sharp and venomous. You're nothing, and she, he pointed at Sarah with disgust, is nothing more than debt, trash to be used and discarded. Sarah flinched at the words, her chest tightening, but before she could shrink further, Liam's voice cut through the air like a blade. She's not trash, he said fiercely. She's a human being, and she deserves better than this. The room went silent. Even the other men hesitated, their confidence shaken by the conviction in Liam's tone. Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. For so long she had been treated like she was worthless, like her life didn't matter. But in that moment Liam's words made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Value. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. She tried to hide them, but Liam noticed. He didn't say anything, but the softness in his gaze told her everything. He wasn't just protecting her out of duty. He cared. Truly cared. The scarred man stepped back, uncertain now. The others exchanged glances, their earlier eagerness dimming. They hadn't expected resistance, not like this. And they certainly hadn't expected someone to challenge Mr. Barrow so boldly. Mr. Barrow's face twisted with fury. You'll regret this, Liam, he hissed. No one defies me and walks away alive. But Liam didn't falter. He reached for Sarah's hand, pulling her gently to her feet. Then I guess tonight will be different, he said quietly, though his words carried through the room. Sarah's legs wobbled, but Liam's steady grip kept her standing. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. Why are you doing this for me? Liam glanced down at her, his expression softening. Because no one ever did it for me, he admitted. And I won't let you go through this alone. The truth in his words hit Sarah harder than anything else that night. He wasn't just a stranger. He was someone who understood pain, someone who had faced his own battles. And now, he was willing to fight for her. The men around them shuffled, uneasily, torn between greed and fear. Mr. Barrow's fury simmered, his hands clenched into fists. But Sarah no longer felt as powerless as before. With Liam beside her, she felt stronger, braver. The night was far from over. The danger was still real. But for the first time, Sarah believed that she had a chance to fight, a chance to escape, a chance to live, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to love. The twist. The room had become a battlefield, the air thick with tension, fear, and the heavy smell of sweat. Liam stood firmly between Sarah and Mr. Barrow, his stance unwavering, his jaw clenched with determination. Sarah could barely catch her breath as she watched the scene unfold. For the first time in her life, someone was standing up for her, and it felt both surreal and terrifying. Mr. Barrow's eyes gleamed with fury, his face twisted into an expression that seemed capable of tearing the world apart. You're making a huge mistake, Liam, he spat, his voice low and dangerous. Do you really think you can change the rules? You think you can save her? Liam's expression didn't waver. I'm not here to change the rules, Barrow. I'm here to end them, he replied, his voice calm but filled with a fire that seemed to burn in his chest. Sarah could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just standing up for her. He was challenging everything Mr. Barrow represented. He was challenging the system of cruelty and exploitation that had held her captive for far too long. She had never known anyone to be this brave, to risk everything for her well-being, and it made her heart swell with both gratitude and dread. But she knew the danger wasn't over. The men in the room were still silent, watching the confrontation unfold, but the tension between Liam and Mr. Barrow was thickening like a storm about to break. "You don't understand, do you?" Mr. Barrow's voice was quieter now, almost mocking. "You think you can just waltz in here and take her? You think you can save her? She's mine and she'll always be mine until the debt is paid. You can't fight that." Liam didn't flinch. "I don't have to fight you, Barrow. I'll pay the debt myself," he said, his voice low but clear. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes widened as she looked up at Liam, her confusion mixing with disbelief. You can't. You don't have that kind of money." "You're not—" "I'll find a way," Liam interrupted gently, his eyes locked on hers. "I'm not going to let him have you, Sarah. Not like this." Mr. Barrow's eyes flickered with uncertainty, though he quickly masked it with a scowl. "And how do you plan to pay her debt? You think I'm just going to let you waltz in and save the day?" "I'll do whatever it takes," Liam said, his voice resolute. "I'll take the debt on myself." For a moment, the room fell into an eerie silence. The other men exchanged glances, clearly shocked by what Liam had said. They had expected him to back down, to cower before Mr. Barrow's authority. But instead, he was offering a solution that no one had expected, one that could change everything. Sarah couldn't breathe. Her heart raced in her chest, torn between the shock of Liam's offer and the overwhelming desire to protect him from the consequences. She didn't want him to suffer for her mistakes. This was her debt, her responsibility, not his. And yet, here he was, willing to take it all on for her. "Do you know what you're saying?" Mr. Barrow asked, his voice suddenly cold. "Do you know what you're offering? The debt is more than just money, Liam. It's not something you can just buy your way out of. It's a life, a body, Sarah's body. And if you take that from me, there will be consequences. You won't walk away from this." Liam stepped forward, his eyes burning with defiance. "I'm not afraid of you, Barrow. You think you control everything, but you don't. You've broken too many lives, ruined too many people. I won't stand by and let you destroy another one." For the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in Mr. Barrow's eyes. He had ruled this world for so long, had built his empire on the backs of those like Sarah, and he had never once been challenged like this. He had expected Liam to back down, to be intimidated by his threats. But Liam wasn't intimidated. He wasn't afraid, and that more than anything made him dangerous. "Let me make this clear, Barrow," Liam continued, his voice sharp and unwavering. "I will do whatever it takes to make sure Sarah walks out of here tonight. I'll pay the price for her, no matter what it is. And if that means taking on your debt, then I'll take it. But she won't be your pawn anymore." The room was silent, the air thick with the weight of his words. Even the other men, who had once seemed eager for their turn, were now shifting, uneasily, uncertain of how to react. Mr. Barrow narrowed his eyes, his lips curling into a twisted smile. "You think you can buy her freedom? You think you can make me just let you walk away?" "Well, Liam," he said, his voice dripping with mockery, "you've just made a terrible mistake. I'll make sure you regret it." Liam didn't flinch, but Sarah could see the determination in his eyes. He wasn't backing down. And for the first time that night, Sarah felt a rush of hope, real hope, not the fragile kind that had flickered in her heart earlier. This was different. Liam was willing to sacrifice everything for her, and she didn't know how to handle that. But before Sarah could say anything, Mr. Barrow snapped his fingers, signaling the other men to step forward. The tension in the room escalated, and Sarah felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She knew what was coming. The deal had been made, and now it was time for the consequences. "I don't want to do this, but you forced my hand, Liam," Mr. Barrow said, his voice full of venom. "You'll pay for this." But Liam wasn't afraid. He turned to Sarah, his eyes softening. "Stay close to me," he whispered. "No matter what happens, I won't let them hurt you." As the men closed in, the air crackled with the promise of a showdown. But in that moment, Sarah realized something. No matter what happened next, she wasn't alone anymore. Liam had fought for her, and she wasn't going to let him face this battle alone. The room was filled with a sense of impending chaos. But it was different now. Sarah wasn't powerless. She was fighting for herself, for Liam, and for a future that had once seemed impossible. Love and freedom. The room was silent, the tension hanging in the air like a heavy storm cloud ready to burst. Sarah stood beside Liam, her heart racing as the men surrounding them exchanged uncertain glances. Mr. Barrow's eyes were cold, but there was a flicker of unease in them now, something he couldn't hide. For the first time in a long time, he seemed to be losing control. Liam stood tall, his posture unyielding. He had made the offer, a bold, reckless offer to take on Sarah's debt in its entirety. He was willing to sacrifice everything, his safety, his future, just to give her a chance to escape this nightmare. And though the situation had seemed hopeless at times, there was something undeniable about the quiet strength he radiated. The other men, who had once been eager to claim their share of Sarah, now looked hesitant. They had expected to see fear in Liam's eyes, but instead, they saw defiance, a refusal to back down. And that scared them more than they cared to admit. Mr. Barrow, still trying to assert his dominance, sneered at Liam. "You think you can just buy your way out of this? Do you really think I'll let her go so easily?" Liam didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered from Barrow's. "I'm not buying her. I'm buying her freedom," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but the intensity behind his words was impossible to ignore. "And that's something you can't take from me." For a long moment, Mr. Barrow said nothing. He was weighing his options, trying to determine if there was a way out of this for him, a way to reassert control. But it was clear that the power had shifted. Liam's offer had disrupted everything. The men around them, once so eager to get their turn, were now unsure of what to do. They weren't used to this. They weren't used to someone challenging Barrow's authority so openly. Sarah watched the scene unfold, her breath catching in her throat. She had never imagined this moment would come, never thought she'd see someone fight so fiercely for her, let alone for someone to risk everything just to set her free. Her heart ached with gratitude, but also with something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name yet. Mr. Barrow took a step back, his expression hardening. He was a man who had always gotten what he wanted, who had never been challenged like this. But now he had no answer, no solution to the threat that Liam posed. And for the first time in his life, Barrow felt like he was losing. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Mr. Barrow asked, his voice rising in anger. "Do you think I'll let you leave with her? She's mine. She's always been mine." Liam took a step forward, closing the gap between them. "No, she's not," he said firmly. "She's a human being. She's not your possession, and I won't let you treat her like one." The room fell into a heavy silence. The other men seemed to shrink back, unsure of what to do now that their leader was losing control. Barrow's grip on power was slipping, and he knew it. The anger that had driven him all these years was now turning inward, and he was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, he had underestimated Liam. "You think you can change the rules?" Barrow spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just walk in and decide who gets to keep her? You're a fool." Liam didn't respond. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. He wasn't here to negotiate, to beg for Sarah's freedom. He was here to take it. And he would do whatever it took to ensure that she walked out of that room, free from the torment that had haunted her for so long. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Barrow let out a frustrated sigh. His shoulders slumped slightly, and for the first time he seemed smaller, less menacing. "Fine," he muttered, his voice laced with defeat. "Take her. But know this, you'll regret it. You can't escape me forever." Liam didn't say a word. He turned to Sarah, his eyes softening as he reached out to her. She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing, but then she took his hand. His grip was warm, steady, and in that moment, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was free, truly free. The men in the room watched silently as Sarah and Liam began to walk toward the door. There was no more resistance, no more threats. Mr. Barrow had lost, and they all knew it. Sarah had no idea where the road ahead would take her, but for the first time, she felt like she had control over her own life. As they reached the door, Liam turned back to face the room. "You've broken too many people's lives," he said quietly, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "But Sarah's isn't one of them, and I'll make sure it stays that way." With those final words, Liam stepped out of the room, pulling Sarah along with him. They walked down the hall away from the nightmare they had left behind. Sarah's legs felt weak, but she held onto Liam's hand like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. As they stepped into the cool night air, Sarah realized something. She wasn't just walking away from the darkness that had consumed her life. She was walking toward something new, something brighter, with Liam by her side. She had never known what it meant to be truly cared for, but now, in this moment, she was starting to understand. She looked up at Liam, her eyes filled with gratitude and wonder. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you do it? Why did you fight for me?" Liam smiled down at her, his eyes gentle but filled with something more. "Because you deserve it," he said simply. "You deserve to be free. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." And for the first time in a long time, Sarah believed him.